right, this video is a continuation of what we were doing in class. We had started this and then the bell rang and I told you guys I was going to kind of do a how-to as far as how to put this in that TI-83 calculator. Okay, so first of all, we have a function written in function notation. F of x is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 3. We can also write it as just y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. And I'm going to show you once again how to put this in your calculator so that your calculator understands what you want. Let me zoom this out a little bit. Okay, so we want to put this function in our calculator. So start by turning it on and clearing it if we need to. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we are going to go to the y equals button. And notice that you have places to put several equations. We just want one equation at a time right now. So this is our first function equation. So we're going to type it in. That is a negative sign. The calculator is not going to understand if you try to use the minus, okay? Because that's like they're saying you're going to subtract it from something. Well, it's just that the sign on it's negative, so make sure you use the negative sign down here. So that's negative 0.5, because that's the decimal equivalent to half. Negative 0.5, and then I'm going to use this button right here with the little xt theta in. I'm going to press that, and it's going to give me an x, and then I'm going to say plus 3. All right, so there's my equation. And if I hit this button that says graph, it will build that graph. Now, if you don't get this exact picture, it may be because the window settings are a little bit different. If you hit window, it should go from, basically it's telling you that it's going to give you grid lines from negative 10 up to positive 10 on your x-axis and negative 10 up to positive 10 on your y-axis. If yours says something different, that may be why your graph looks a little bit different. Anyway, go back to graph, and there you go. There's your line. I could do this by hand on a piece of graph paper, and it would look the same. The slope would be the same, the y-intercept would be the same, etc. Okay? But then it says use the graphing calculator to display the function and use the trace to find the function value when x is equal to negative 2. Okay, so let me show you how to do that. Okay, so we'd like to know the value of y when x is negative 2. So we're going to hit the little trace button, and then we're going to say negative 2, enter, and it'll show you. Here's the little blinker showing you where the point equivalent to x is negative 2. So when x is negative 2, y is 4. Okay, now it's really important that I used the negative sign and not the minus sign, because if I use the minus sign, here, let me go back to the graph. If I say trace and then I hit, I want a negative 2, and I hit minus 2, it doesn't understand that. See, you're going to get an error message. So, back to the graph, clear, back to my graph. If I want to know the value of y when x is negative 2, all you have to do, you don't have to try to tell it, hey, I mean x. It already knows you're going to give it an x value. So, negative 2, enter. And it says when x is negative 2, y is negative 4. Let's try another one. When x is 0, enter. When x is 0, y is 3. When x is, 5, y is 0.5. Okay, so that's how that trace button works. Okay, so we're going to move on to B, which is an equation for a different line. So I'm actually going to go back to my y equals, and I want to get rid of that equation. because I only want one equation at a time for right now. So I'm going to put in the new equation, and that is 3/2 x minus 4. 3/2 is the same as 1.5, so I'm going to put 1.5 minus 4. And I'm going to hit, oh, pardon me, can't do that. It'll give me an error. 1.5 and then hit my x minus 4. Okay, so there's my equation. I would like the graphing calculator to graph that equation. So there you go. There's the graph to that equation. And again, it's still asking you, and we're just practicing, it wants to know the y value when x is -2. So I can hit the trace button. And again, I'm going to use the negative sign down here. Okay, not the minus sign. So I want to know the value of y when x is -2. So enter. When x is -2, y is -7. Okay, could you do this without a graphing calculator? And the answer is absolutely. I never had a graphing calculator when I was y'all's age, so we did it the old-fashioned way. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to generate some points for x and y values, because again, the domain is not specified, so I can assume that the domain is all real numbers. So let me do that real quick. And then I'm going to use those to generate ordered pairs that I'm going to graph on my graph that they've provided me. Okay, so I just picked some x values. I stayed kind of close to x equals 0 because I know I don't have a whole lot of room on this graph. So I just went -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. And instead of doing 3/2, I just converted that to 1.5 because 3/2 is 1.5. So 1.5 times -2 minus 4, and you get -7. 1.5 times -1 minus 4, and you get -5.5, etc. So there are all my y values that I've generated with my x values. And now I'm going to plot them. Okay, so there are my 5 points. And because the domain is all real numbers, I can actually draw a line through my points and put an arrow on both ends of my line. Like so. So, locate -2 on the x-axis. Draw a vertical line segment from -2 on the x-axis to the graph of the function, and a horizontal line segment from that graph of the function to the y-axis. Okay, so here's -2, and they're telling me basically drop down until I hit the line, and go over and read. And that's at -7. I already know that because I actually picked one of those points. But that's what you would do if you weren't going to do it on the graphing calculator. Could I have done that up here? Absolutely. I could take a piece of graph paper, graph the same thing, get the exact same result. So you kind of need to be familiar with doing it both ways, both by hand, which is probably what you're more familiar with, and with the graphing calculator. Okay, I'm going to continue on to number 6, and I'm going to do number 6 both ways, both by hand here, and I'll show you also on the graphing calculator. So I'm just going to generate -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, again, because that's right around the origin as far as x values are concerned. Okay, so if I pick these x values, put them into this function, negative x, and x is already -2, so a -2, that means it's positive now. So 2 plus 7 is 9. The negative of -1 plus 7 is 8, because two negatives make a positive. 0 plus 7 is 7. The negative of 1, so that's -1 plus 7 is 6. -2 plus 7 is 5. So I take the ordered pairs and I put them over here on the graph. And again, there's no domain specified, so I can assume that the domain is all real numbers. So we can put an arrow on both ends. And let's find the value of f of x when x is 3. Okay, so what I would do is I'd go over here to x equals 3, and then I'd go up until it hits the graph, and I'd go over and read. Okay, I can also do this on the graphing calculator. Okay, I'm back at my y equals button. Hopefully y'all can see that. I'm going to clear that off because that's the equation from the previous problem. So y equals, and I'm going to put negative, so hit the negative sign, x plus 7. And I'm going to hit graph. Okay. Okay, so just so that you can see, because it's kind of hard to read because of the glare. So negative x plus 7, and then there's your graph. And then if I want to know what the value of y is when x is 3, then I hit the trace button. And it already knows that you're asking about an x value, so you just have to put 3 and hit enter. So when x is 3, the y value is 4. And I could have figured that out if I'd kept going on my x values. But anyway, there's two different ways to do the same thing. One by hand and one on the graphing calculator. So this is the back of the practice problems that you got. And I'd like to just point out the fact that this very last problem on the last page is basically asking you to do on your calculator what you've just learned. Okay, so the function h of d, so there's your function, equals 2d plus 4.3. That's basically like saying that this is similar to the f of x equals 2x plus 4.3. It's just the d stands for diameter, so they're using a different variable. It makes no difference. It's still f of x is equal to 2x plus 4.3, or you can say y is equal to 2x plus 4.3. They're asking you to do it on a calculator and come up with the height of the water when the pipe has a diameter of 1.5 inches. So you would graph this, and then you're going to do the trace button because that will be the x value that you enter in the trace button.